Have you been intimidated to create a quilted jacket of your very own? I sure have. I'm Allyson from QuiltNCode, and this is my very first one. While I did it, I took notes, tips, and tricks that I used to create this gorgeous piece of art. I'm going to share all of that with you throughout this video. I will go from the piecing process all the way through the quilting, all the way to the binding, and we'll do the whole project right here. Stay tuned to the end where I give you my things I've learned from this project. Let's get started. When you're making any type of garment clothing, you need to make sure you know what your size is. And so in the pattern, it specifically says a bust, hip, and waist size. That will match with the size of the pattern that you want to make, okay? And so I wanted to show you how to do that. I am gonna leave my shirt on because remember, this is a bulky jacket and I don't want it to be too tight. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave that on. That way I just have a little bit of extra. And I wanna go around right here. This is my bust. I wanna make sure that I am getting that whole bust line in there. And I wanna make sure that when I look at this number, that I don't take anything off of it. Don't think that you want of the size you want to be. Go ahead with the size that you are. You will be much happier with the size of your jacket. I'm gonna do the same thing with my waist, and I'm going right where I'm wearing jeans right now. I'm going right where my jeans are hitting, okay? And then hips, I wanna be down here, okay? So that I am where my hips are hitting. And I'm gonna take that measurement for each one of those, and then I'm gonna line them up with the measurements that are in the pattern. When I was doing this, there were two measurements that were on one size and one measurement that was on the other size. I went with the larger size just because I know I can always take away and not necessarily give back to the fabric. I used the pattern pieces on the muslin to go ahead and sew out a jacket. And you notice that I went ahead and left on my lines because this line right here is going to tell me whether I need to lengthen or shorten it. And so I kept all the lines. That way I knew where I was going with everything. I'm going to go ahead and try it on. And you know, spoilers, I think it's fitting great. So, but I did want to notice that when I am moving my arms like this, I'm a little tight back here. And once I get all that bulk of all the batting and everything else, I've decided to go ahead and just increase this distance a little bit just so that I could make sure that I have enough space when I actually make the jacket that I can get it right in the way I want it to feel. But other than that, I felt like this pattern is doing really well, and we'll see. I'm using the Tamarack jacket from Grainline Studios, and I'm gonna be doing view A. But when I trace out my patterns, because I'm using the pattern here, I am going to trace that out onto butcher paper, and I'm going to go ahead and do view B because I can always fold in that size. I'll show you in just a second. Each piece was traced out onto butcher paper, and now I can show you some of the different lines and what they mean on the pattern. I am not going to do the pocket for this jacket simply because I want to try and get it done and get the idea and understand all the aspects of the pattern, but I know that later I will want to have that pocket. And so I am going to just simply darken up these lines for you so that you can see. This is the grain line. The grain line is where I want to keep the grain of the fabric. And so I want to make sure that the grain of the fabric is going in this direction. And then this right here is where my line is for lengthening or shortening. And then down here, this is telling me where my approximate hip line is going to be. And that is how it is on every single one of the pieces. So when I go to trace this out on my muslin, I can know exactly where everything is. And then I mentioned that over here on view A, I can just fold that for view A. And so I'm going to keep this out here. That way I don't have to trace out a whole nother pattern. I can simply just fold that in for the next time I do a jacket. And then I also mentioned that I wanted to give myself just a little bit of extra space right here in the going to the back of the pattern. And so to do that, I placed the back and the front. So this is the neckline right here, and this is where the armhole is going to be. I have just given myself a little bit of extra there, and then I have a feeling I'll be trimming that off, but at least it gives me some to trim off if needed. I've laid as much as I can out. Now notice that I have pieces that are gonna need more fabric, and so I'm just pulling these out. And then my scraps, I have a whole bunch of scraps from cutting 3.5-inch squares that I can sort of slip in wherever. But the first thing that I'm gonna do is go ahead and get some rows stitched down, because as they shrink, I know I'm gonna need more. This piece may not cut it down here, and so it may need to be a full piece. And so it's better for me to go ahead and start with most of it covered and get the rows down. I am not going to stitch them, the rows together yet. I'm just going to figure out where my rows go. And I'm just going to leave these little white pieces hanging out here because I know that they'll go in eventually. I am using Fusible fleece as my batting, simply because I knew I could cut that fusible fleece out. That fusible fleece was not going to stretch on me and do that type of thing. I'm comfortable using fusible fleece as my quilting base, and so it makes it easier for me for this project since it's my very first time. You can use whatever base for your batting that you would like to. I've already done this side of the front of the jacket, and so you can see how I have stitched everything together and gotten it all ready, but I wanted to show you how that was going to happen. So the first thing I did was I had all my pieces and I began laying them out so that they're about 1 inch from the front line. Remember, I told you I was keeping all my lines, and so what I'm going to do here is I am going to first actually draw that line out so that you can see exactly where that line is. And before I iron it down onto the fusible fleece of the other piece, I will do the same exact thing just to make sure everybody is lined up. The other thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm lined up here, because this is going to meet in the front. I want to make sure that everything is going to be lined up as perfectly as it possibly can be. And so you can see how I sort of have that center line. I'm going to just mark that, and I am using a friction pen, so that friction pen is going to disappear when I do my ironing. So I want to go about 1 inch over from where that line is. And the reason why I'm doing that is simply because my pattern seems to need to move over in order to get the pieces that I want on there. So I'm going to go ahead and draw this line. That way I can make sure everybody is perfect when I go to line this up with the other piece. Having all my lines drawn on here helps me figure out where everything is going to go. I have the tips here of these two lining up on this line right here, and then I'm going straight down the center here. I know that I've already done one side, and so I wanted to have 5 going down and then 3 going down. And so we will get those. And now I can just go in and fill in with all the other 3.5-inch squares that I picked out. I only had 5 different yardages of fabric, and so I ended up with only having the ability to do 5 different colors, and so sometimes it gets me in trouble as to what fabrics I can put there. And so I'm just going to fill in with the different fabrics, and then see, with this one I can just turn her over. That way that one's not right next to it. And I'm just going to keep going like this until I get the whole piece, and then I'm going to show you how to piece it before we iron. And then you can leave it on. I haven't ironed any of the rows yet. I just wanted to show you how much shrinkage there is. And so when I look down here, even though that looks like I could use a scrap, I'm probably going to go ahead and put a whole piece. I definitely need a whole piece here, a whole piece here, a whole piece here. And so I'm going to get started adding on some pieces, and then I'm going to go ahead and show you how it looks ironed. Whenever I do a quilt on point, it just messes me up. And so now that I've got all my rows all situated, I went ahead and double checked that we're on the line that I wanted to be on. And then, and you can see how I've even added a few little things, because I know that now it's going to squinch in like this. And so up here, I'm going to need some more. I might need some more down here, but I went ahead and added everything I think I'm going to need for that direction. And now I'm going to start shrinking it this way. Okay, so I am going to start from the top and just work my way down. The thing that is interesting about that is that I like to use lots of pins for this process. I start by figuring out exactly where I want to be, and then I have already ironed them so that the seams are going in opposite directions. And now I'm going to pin each of those seams just so that I can make sure they stay nested and that I keep my cool while I'm doing this, because the on point really messes with my brain. And then I only do one row at a time. I'm going to go ahead and bring it over here and lay it right back out, and then stitch the next row to it. Another thing I do is I go ahead and iron as I go. That way I can see it as it's, I see that spot right there, and I want to be able to see exactly where everything's going, and just having it nice and neat and pressed makes that easier. So this is looking wonderful. I need to get this part so that I make sure that I am centered here and everything looks fantastic. Okay, so I need to take this off and make my darts. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my pins in. I'm going to pin right here where I'm meeting up with this line right here. And I'm also going to pin right along the edge of where I want my interfacing to line up with. And that way, when I bring this back after having put my little dart in, it'll be easier to line up for me. To create the dart, I'm taking the Fusible fleece and I'm folding right along the slit. And then I'm going to stitch right along this opening here. I am leaving it so that it is the sticky side up so that it'll stick to the inside of my vest. I did the same thing with this vest. I had a bit of bulk because it was right on that seam, and now I'm going to press the seam open just like that. Now I can bring my Fusible fleece over and line it back up with my positioned pins to make it just a little bit easier. And now I'm going to iron it in place. The only pieces that need to worry this much about the positioning are the fronts, because they have the darts. And now that I have everything in place, I can go ahead and remove these pins. Whenever you're using Fusible fleece or any type of interfacing, make sure you have a cover cloth, or that you're doing it from the fabric side of the piece. And so I'm going to leave the dart alone and go ahead and get everything else in place down here. And then I like to use a lot of steam on Fusible fleece. And then as I get closer to the dart, I am going to pull out my cover cloth. I'm going to iron on either side of the dart because I do want it to have that shape to it. And I can see it a little bit better if I'm on the Fusible fleece side, so I'm using a cover cloth. Last thing to do with this piece before quilting is simply to cut around my interfacing so that I know where I'm quilting. I want to line up the fusible fleece and pieced side with my lining. And I'm going to sort of push this guy in because that's where I want it to lay next to the quilted part. So the first thing I'm going to do is, now that I've got it all laid out as best as I can, and you can see here there's a little trimming to do up there, I am going to just begin by folding over and spraying my 505, and I'm going to lay that out. And you notice I'm keeping this hand here just so that I have plenty to hold that down while I press that down. And then I like to turn it around this way so that I can lay this over where I've already done the 505, and I'm just going to slowly inch this way forward. And so I'm going to go ahead and get this side done. The thing about 505 is that you want to do your 505 pretty close to the time that you want to quilt. So I did not go ahead and 505 all my pieces at the same time because I knew it was going to take me a couple of days to get everything quilted. And so I did one piece at a time, quilted it, and then did the next piece. I want to try and make this as flat as possible, so you can see how I'm using one hand underneath to just sort of smooth that out, and I'm taking my time just a little bit at a time. I want to start with the line that goes through my dart because that is going to be the one that is the most difficult, and I want to keep the shape of my jacket as I go through there. I'm going to start here at the end. And then when I get to this dart, I'm really kind of making sure that all of the placement is good. And then once I get through there, I can speed up and finish that line. I'm simply going to turn this around, and I'm going to go the opposite direction on the same line. I'm going to stop right here just to make sure that everything is lining up as I do this quilting. Now I'm going to go the other direction so that the rest of the quilting is going to be easy and I can simply relax and quilt. There are a variety of ways to create bias strips for your jacket. I'm going to use the Stripology ruler to create my bias binding. I have my strip of fabric laid out. I went ahead and ironed to get rid of my crease line in my fabric. Just makes it a little easier to work with. And then I have placed my my salvage edge up by my raw edge. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this other side down just like that. Okay, now you're looking for a 45-degree cut. So I'm going to turn this way so that I have my 45-degree cut. And then over here, I have a little bit of extra left over on the side. So I'm going to just slip that right up. And then I'm going to bring this side in so that I have my folds matching down here. And I'm going to bring this down just like this. Now I'm ready to cut. So I am cutting 2-inch bias strips. With my XL ruler, I can line up my fold line down here, and double check that up here everything is lined up as well with the horizontal lines. I am going to start by getting rid of that fold on the end. And then I'm just going to go through with my 2-inch cuts. All right, and when I lift this up, I have all my strips. I can go ahead and continue cutting for a little bit to get some more, but I think I'm going to stop there, make sure I have enough. Now that all the strips are cut out, we want to put them together. And so you're going to match up your mitered edge right here, just like this. And you want to make sure that you're leaving a nice 1/4 inch off the tip right there, so that when you stitch it, it's going to come out flat. So now I simply stitch my 1/4 inch and I end up with a nice long strip that once I have gotten my strips all sewn together, I start by folding them in half and pressing, and then I can bring the edges to the center, turn them over and press again. I like to use my ironing board because then I can pin in as I go. That holds everything in place. And I will admit that this entire thing of bias strips did take me about an hour to fold. And so it's not a quick process, but it is worth it in the end. The first step is to get the bias binding on the back on the bottom edge. And so this is where bias binding is just so important. And that is, you can see how this is nicely laying as I ease it in around this nice curved edge. And so that is the absolute beauty of bias binding or bias strips. And so I'm going to go all the way around to the other edge. The other thing that I did was I went ahead and folded this over so that it's a nice clean edge when I go to turn this. And so I'm going to do that on the other side as well. I top stitched on the front side of the back side of the jacket. And so remember, this is my first time doing this. I wanted to see how it would look. And I did not take into account the amount of give that the bias would have. And so it's come over quite a bit when I did all my ironing and that type of thing. And so you can see that I sort of have a lip here. I am not happy with that. So I am simply going to take it and stitch in the ditch over here just to make sure that I have got this down really well. And then in the future, I will not trim down I trimmed down a little bit of my raw edge right here once I put everything on. The pattern says to finish off raw edges. So I zigzagged my raw edges here on my shoulder seams, but I don't like it. It didn't go through the sewing machine well and just doesn't look very good. So I've decided to finish it a different way. I had some bias left over from my bias. What I've done is press this down really, really well. And I'm going to center this right on top of that seam. And I'm going to pin it in place with some flower pins. The reason why I'm using flower pins is because I'm going to turn this over and stitch in the ditch along the seam line of my jacket. I'm going to take this to the sewing machine. I stitched right down the seam of my shoulder. You can barely see it. I did go off a little bit over here, but that will be covered later. And then if you look over here on this side, you can see how I went straight down that seam. And now I can remove those pins. So I've positioned the jacket so that I have the ability to now fold this in just like this. And I am going to press it so that it's pressed down really nicely and will hopefully stay in place for me. And the idea here is that now I can take this and fold this back over. So now I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. I have tucked in the edges on both sides, and I'm just going to give it one final steamer so that it lays nice and flat here. And then I'm going to use a stitch that I use for binding. So I'm just going to use my binding stitch to secure these pieces down. And the way I do a binding stitch is I do a blind binding stitch. So I'm going to start up here. At my neckline. And yes, I am doing this by hand. You could certainly top stitch from the front if you wished. And then what I do is I go in and I catch the fabric in between the layers of the quilt and come back up. So, and I'm going to do that about, a half a centimeter apart. And then I have my finger underneath that's feeling to make sure that I'm staying between the layers of the quilt. And like I said, this is my regular binding stitch, so this is what I would use to bind a quilt. And as you can see, I'm already like halfway through this, so this isn't taking me long, and I'm already loving the look. I'm treating the bias just like I would treat a binding that I'm putting on my quilt. So because I'm doing a 1/2 inch stitch, I've stopped a 1/2 inch before the edge of the next section. And then I'm just simply going to take this up so that I have a nice mitered corner here. And I like to show how this is now straight, and then I can fold this down just like that. Now I left that 1/2 inch here. But when I go back to stitch here, I can start at the very end. And you can see how this is lining up beautifully right here. And I like to stick a pin right in here at the beginning, just to make sure that it looks really, really good, okay? And then because this is getting ready to curve, I'm gonna go ahead and pin this section as well, so that I don't have to worry about anything slipping or moving on me as I put it through the machine. Here is my end point, so I'm going to go ahead and cut that off about a 1/2 to 1/4 of an inch above. That way I can fold this over. I'm going to go ahead and steam it, and that way it's ready to go when I'm ready to fold over here. So when you're doing the neckline, you want to make sure that we're pinning really well. I like to use pins in this place, not clips, just because it just holds it much better. And now I'm going to go stitch around that neckline. I hope you have enjoyed this project. Here are a couple of tips and things that I learned as I went through the project. Number 1, if you are piecing your jacket, like this jacket is pieced, use the grain line, the lengthen and shorten line, and the hip line to make sure that your pieces are lined up straight. Number 2, the piecing caused a lot of shrinkage, far more than I anticipated. So make sure you have plenty of fabric left over so that you can fit in where those pieces start shrinking your project. Number 3, when you do your bias binding, make sure that you're lining up that raw edge. And then as long as you're stitching on that 1/2 inch fold line, you don't need to press away before you fold and tuck in for the final stitch. And lastly, I will do a lighter batting with my next jacket, which is already in production, by the way. I hope you've enjoyed working on this project with me. So if you have tips that you'd like to add, I'd love to see them in the comments. And in the description, I have placed where you can get our Tamarack jacket pattern and the Lil Billie Stripology Designs pattern that I used for the piecing of this project. I hope that you've enjoyed it, and if you have, please make sure you subscribe to our channel, like, comment, all that other stuff that helps us with our social media algorithm. And we will see you with our next project. Bye, everyone.